The Bitcoin Group, the American original. For over the last 10 years, the sharpest Satoshis, the best Bitcoins, the hardest cryptocurrency talk. We'd like to welcome our panelists, Jedi from Quantum Project. Dan Eve, the Crypto Raptor.
Hey ho, happy Friday.
Nice to be here.
There's Jed. And I'm Thomas Hunt from the World Crypto Network. Moving on to issue one. Issue one, the same issue as last week. The battle between Bitcoin Core versus Knots is getting ugly. As Victoria and I debated last week, Bitcoin Knots proposes that the op return limit should not be raised and aims to prevent CP and other bad things from being stored, quote, inside the Bitcoin blockchain, inside of op return. Bitcoin Core's argument seems to be that people are already putting JPEGs into the blockchain with ordinals and other ways where they break the blockchain through taproot or other open mistakes. Then they don't pay for the JPEGs. Why not have them pay for the JPEGs? But then there's a whole debate about if they're JPEGs or not and all of that. You guys responded here on the Bitcoin group number 466 last week, Core versus Knots. Let's go down to your comments and see what's going on. R. Wes writes, I'm with Victoria. Let the spammers and network cloggers go to another blockchain or create their own. Keep them out of Bitcoin. I've never liked Peter Todd, HBO Satoshi, now less than ever. But Luke Dashier brings me bugs too, even though he's right. Back and Lop, even Andreas. Something wrong there too. Miners? Trust them? What the fuck? Thomas is right about one thing. Give it time. Of course, we can always trust the supremely stupid markets. Fork and let the market decide. Yikes. I do agree we should give it time. It would be great if Core would just slow down what they're doing. Although I think they would see that as Knots winning. And if they have other things they want to develop based on this, that might be the reason for their timeline. A lot of our big comments come from, I'm sorry, I don't know how to say your name, El Jashel. I hope I said it right. Sorry, man. He says, maybe you do not understand the issue. That is why you're confused. Todd is not very likable to me, but the argument he's making is correct, except that filters don't work, and face the fact that people are giving transactions to the miners anyway to get their filthy JPEGs in by paying them. If you can't stop the abuse, then standardize it. For example, the UTX set is not bloated up because someone created an unspendable transaction by storing something in the signatures or used Taproot to store stuff in the tree. And Res says he agrees. He's having trouble understanding the issue, but is going to stick with Core because what else are you going to do? Ella Giselle responds again, nobody is changing anything in the consensus rules. Nothing changes. There's nothing wrong happening. Everything will work exactly as it was working before. He says you're not messing with what Bitcoin is, yet it is necessary to align consensus more with mempool policy and to incentivize people from bloating up the UTO sec. Skeptic 33 writes, was listening to a node operator talk about this Knots thing. His point made sense. Till now, his node just stores a history of transactions. He's okay with that. With the memory expansion, his node, his machine in his house, potentially fills with CP and filth that he does not want in his system's hard drives. Big no from him. OG Furious writes, fiat Bitcoiners are trying to monetize the time chain. Leave it alone and go play with your DeFi. XP Fomentum writes, I hardly endorse Don Knotts. Don Knotts, of course, famously from the Andy Griffith Show, Three's Company, Matlock, and more. Even Herbie goes to Monte Carlo. Everyone supports Don Knotts. Anyway, back to the arguments. Valley Soundboy asks, can we get Ben to explain this mempool consensus level stuff, even if he doesn't want to express an opinion on Knots versus Core? And the debate goes on. As he says, the protest is not valid. The debate has taken place. The arguments are out there. And now it's S-flinning by a group of unserious people. It's not a consensus change. Nobody is allowing 4 megabytes now. It was always possible, and people did it anyway. The whole thing is just about whether mempool policy should allow those transactions, which can be sent to any miner included in the blockchain anyway if you pay them in the mempool. It's a maintenance task. Mempool policy should reflect what's going into the blocks. There's nothing to talk about. It was blown out of proportions by a few people with strange world views. He says our knots coverage is not okay. You treat the changes as consensus changes and panic. They are not consensus changes. You need to explain to your viewers what the difference is between consensus and mempool policy. So consensus is a huge change to Bitcoin through a soft fork, or if they change enough that they have to change the blockchain, a hard fork. About the compatibility. If it's not backwards compatible, it's a hard fork. We're also seeing some signaling, although I'm told that Knots does actually have their own software. Previously, people were signaling that they wanted to do the hardware or the soft fork, UASF, user activated soft fork. As Lombroso said on the Mad Bitcoin show, they never wanted to use signaling again. But we are kind of back into a signaling environment with Knots claiming that they've passed 21%. This means that the nodes are running their software, but it's not a major change from the core software. It's mainly about this op return issue that we continue to learn more about every week. Jed, what do you think about op return, the consensus change versus the mempool policy, and the surprising to see Knots up 17% to 21% week over week?
Yeah, it's I think my mempool is my mempool. I can filter whatever I want out of it and do what I want with it. It's my node. So, in that sense, running core or knots is really your own choice. What I find amazing here is the depravity that this argument has gone into, and the apparent lack of transparency and governance that was involved in the decision to do what's being done. I have no problem with taking away the op return 80 byte limit and increasing it to, basically it's to 520 bytes, as far as I understand, the stack element. So you can't put a lot of CP in 520 bytes unless you write some custom client that's going to process other op returns after that. You're not going to get a lot of CP there, and you can already do it with ordinals, as you just said. So to me, the whole technical argument is moot. The real issue here is about governance and transparency of how Bitcoin evolves. What I'd like to know more about is who's funding who, and who's making the decisions, and how are those decisions being made. And that should be totally transparent, and you'd avoid the whole situation that we have now. In the case of Knots, I can say, and out of protest, just to raise awareness, I, in solidarity with Knots, stopped running core, dropped the Knots daemon in, and started running Knots. But I can switch it back tomorrow. It's not a problem. But the whole point is we need the transparency and the governance, and to know who's paying who and who's deciding these things in what manner. And that's sort of the crux of the matter for me. So that's sort of how I see it.
It does seem, though, like changing core for Knots is just one master for the other. And at least with core, it's an open source process where we know about the code. We know it's being looked at by hundreds of people, not dozens. As Callie BTC writes on Twitter, Knots has code to turn itself off at a set expiry
100%.
date. Unnecessary, stupid, and outright dangerous. Did you know? Was it discussed by a team of experts? How can such a dangerous feature make its way into a release? And it says by trusting a single guy who lives in his own reality, which was slightly echoed by our commenter as well, that the Knots development might not be who you want in charge, even if they are leading what seems on its face a successful moral campaign, waving the flag. Oh no, there's bad things in the blockchain, which again, like Jed, I'm not seeing. I'm seeing there was already text in the blockchain. So they already put whatever your version of bad text is into the blockchain, whatever is offensive to you, the words are in there.
It's there.
Right?
It's already there.
Right? So that already happened. Also, if we really zoom out a step and think about computer science, I don't know the details, but I think you can break a JPEG down into text, and you could store enough consecutive text or linked text where you could rebuild the JPEG, right? You could It would be laborious and it would be difficult. You'd need a special client. You wouldn't just load up your web browser to see your dirty blockchain JPEG. But I'm sure someone could put a small JPEG in there, as well as things like ordinals or stamps, which are very small and expensive JPEGs, which again could be CP already. For me, and as I discussed with Victoria last week, and I'm not saying this is a negative, I'm saying this as like an acceptance of a monetary system. Bitcoin already carries money that can be used to support causes that we don't support, things like CP, terrorism, other things we are against on this show, but we acknowledge that money can be used to support them. And in my mind, money as a support is so much more devastating than perhaps hosting a very hard to get image, or one image, expensive to store, hard to get. Maybe if it's blackmail or whatever, certainly it's unfortunate. But the other internet, the existing internet, is already doing this so much better and for so much cheaper.
It is indeed. Are you even hosting? Are you infrastructure, or are you actually hosting that image? Because when someone gets that image, are they really getting it from you? No, they're getting it from the chain on their own node or on the node that they connect to. So you're not necessarily hosting, you're just infrastructure. But your point about the governance is exactly my point as well. The governance of knots is potentially worse than core because there are less people involved in the consensus on those decisions. So that's and there's less code review, as you rightly pointed out. So this is the question, but the crisis is really, we need better governance all around on Bitcoin. We need more transparency. That's what we need all around. The decision should be taken in a manner where they are publicized or socialized before they are finalized. And I think that's what triggered this whole issue that we're seeing today, is that a decision was not socialized before it was finalized. And technically, it's not going to change Bitcoin. It's not going to impact Bitcoin. And I think core is going to be the way to go. That's just how it is. I mean, unless the stack limit gets changed, you're going to pay more. You're going to pay more to put a JPEG using op return than you will using the ordinals method to put data on chain, because that benefits from the SegWit discount. So I don't see any reason why someone would use op return to spam when you can already do it using ordinals for a quarter of the price.
That's just the core of the argument, though, right? Though, isn't it? Because then Bitcoin moves from money to data store, and what becomes more important, the storage, the payment of the storage of that data, or the money aspect of it. So if it becomes that popular that the data storage outweighs the money side, that's, from what I understand, that's kind of part of Luke Dish's sort of argument. You can set the software expiry to 0, but that just seems like a weird extra hack. Software expiry to 0, just to do as a normal user. If we're trying to make it as accessible as possible, that should almost be the default, I think, and then set it to an expiry, or at least give you that suggestion. But then I also read that someone made a good point that when you're storing an image, you still have to process it. So you know there may be a bunch of CP data on there already that we've got no idea about. Like
I'm sure
you
there
could
is
already
already.
be thousands of images somehow encrypted, but the point is it's the encryption of, and it's like, you know, do you say that it's bad for people to be storing this if they don't know what it is, right? Because pretty much anyone could be storing data on there that's encrypted, and that means that everyone would be liable for that data. It's like, how far do you go to decoding that image? And even then, even if it's an 8-byte return, you could still, you know, store a story on there that's not an image, but like a, you know, erotic story about CP that's in words that doesn't need to be decoded. So there's all sorts of ways that it can already be abused. And it seems like this is quite, you know, Core's version is, well, it's going to happen anyway. You might as well control it. Whereas, you know, the Knots version seems more like, you know, try and stamp it out at every sort of level. But does Knots wouldn't if impact on the current way the ordinals are stored, right? It doesn't, does that reverse any of that
No,
work? It's
ordinals are
changed? No.
separate. That's in the
Yeah,
SegWit data.
that's
So
in the
it's
segment. Yeah,
completely separate
yeah,
from the opportune data. And it's and opportune data costs 4 times the price. I mean,
yeah,
SegWit data is 75% discount. It's only 1 unit rather than 4. So it makes more sense to put your data in SegWit anyways.
yeah.
So
Well,
raising this,
and there's
actually, what I think raising the limit, what Core wants to do, potentially opens the door to innovation that none of us have thought of. Because when you have this 82 byte limit and all of a sudden that becomes a 520 byte stack limit, you can do new things with the stack. In the op return, you can return more interesting information and potentially create use cases for money, for Bitcoin as a form of financial technology that have not been done today. So I think actually in that direction, there is a huge potential. And the only problem I have, as I said before, is with the governance and the way that this decision was developed, and that there was no transparency and no socialization of that to gain acceptance. And the whole battle or dispute that we're having now would have been avoided had the core team said, this is what we're going to do, and this is why we're going to do it. And it's not dangerous because there's still a 520 byte. You can't put a big JPEG in 520 bytes, people. There's still that limit on the stack. So it's just so that we can get from this 82 to 520 bytes and open up potentially more innovation in the financial side of what Bitcoin can do. That said, I want transparency. I want to know who's paying who. MIT, BlackRock, Saylor. These people are funding the core devs. I want to know who's funding who and what they're telling them to do. Are any of the core devs accepting orders from outside parties? That's what I want to know. My biggest fear, and it's a realistic fear because I know the NSA has had a program in place for years where they will infiltrate developers into open source projects that are strategically important. And those developers will then work for the NSA on the backside to make sure that those open source projects provide the NSA what it needs. You don't think Bitcoin is in that list of projects? If you don't, you're kind of naive. So there is some stuff going on, and I'd like to know who's paying who.
Well, just like with the congressmen, we wish they'd wear patches on their suits like the NASCAR drivers. We work for big pharma. We work for pharmaceutical company, whatever it is. But I do agree, Jed. The open source process is always open to outside influence. So it would be very easy for a government or a corporation wanted to try to change Bitcoin. They could do it that way. But as for the upgrade process, it does seem like standard IT behavior. They're just kind of jerks. They're know-it-alls. They've rammed it through. They didn't bother talking to us because they don't care. They don't care about your opinion. This seems like the same person, Peter Todd Satoshi maybe, or somebody else who wrote, I don't have time to explain it to you. You can figure it out. Satoshi himself was very dismissive, very IT crowd. Have you tried turning it off again? But Jed makes a good point. If it is cheaper to put ordinals or to put NFTs into these, the Taproot mistake, the SegWit bug or whatever it is, to put it into there, why would they use this more expensive op return field? They've said that there's hopes that the ordinals clients would change over to this. Maybe it would run smoother, be easier to use, something like that. But the economics of it, if it's cheaper to do it there, like Jed says, they'll keep doing it there. If they're already doing CP there, they're doing CP for cheaper in a way that the developers actually don't like, because it is kind of bloating something they didn't expect to bloat. I don't have the details here, but from a non-technical perspective, that does seem like what's happening. And again, for me, I want to go back to this idea of these node runners. Everybody keeps telling me about this Ma and Pa node runner that are sitting out there, and they're, oh, I'm mighty worried there's CP on our node. Oh, I don't know about that. Oh my goodness, what's on my node? Are you guys kidding me? Like, I got my pirate flag out here because I believe we're building a monetary system that's agnostic, right? And agnosticism is important to me. Like, we send everybody's transaction through. I'm sure it funds CP and terrorism and things you don't agree with, and Hamas and whatever bad group or good group you want to say. They're all being funded by Bitcoin because it's money and it doesn't care. So if we broke through the monetary barrier, and we have to break through this data barrier as well, I don't really care. The monetary barrier is way more expensive. As I said earlier, actually monetarily supporting CP, in my mind, is so much worse than just hosting an image by accident or hosting an image as part of a large archive. Many people host, some JPEG, some torrent, something. They accidentally host an image. But there's Ma and Pa node runner. They're looking at everything on their node. It already has the Quran. It already has horrible image, bad image, whatever your religion says is good or bad, whatever is offensive or non-offensive, not to pick on the Bible or the Quran, whatever religious book is in there. They're all in there, right? But Ma and Pa node runner, they just found out yesterday there's some Bible stuff on the node says bad things about Jesus. So they're going to shut down all their nodes. Are you guys kidding me? Like, who are these people, these imaginary people that they've invented who are so, and I hate to say religious, but whatever, they're very serious about what's on their node all of a sudden. And again, we have the transaction history of every bad thing ever done. So if you're worried about something that supported something bad, you're also supporting the transaction history of it, which in a way allows those Bitcoins to continue to be sent. And if you're going by a bad person theory, if the money went from bad people to other bad people to other bad people, you're continuing to support criminal activity by supporting this monetary network, as well as anyone else that uses dollars or banks or whatever. You're using a bank. I mean, that bank.
There's cocaine on every dollar.
Cocaine on every dollar.
Exactly.
Every bank has those
transporting cocaine.
Specially designed suitcases in that big famous case. I mean, I don't understand all of a sudden we're like moral and religious about our nodes. I mean, everyone could disagree with me because we all hate CP. We don't like.
You're absolutely right. We all hate this abhorrent behavior, but people want to police their little world. And that, I think, when you're running a part of a global payment network, you have to step beyond that. You're not going to police. I mean, you can. Your memple's your memple. You do what you want with it. Go right ahead. Be my guest. Everyone can do what they want. But you're not going to change the network. And it's about forcing its non-aggression principle behavior. It's about trying to force other people. So why force other people to be limited to 82 bytes when you don't really have to at 520? What's the difference? You can't really put much in 520 anyways. So why not give people more freedom, more liberty to do what they want to do? And if people are bad, we should support law enforcement to chase them down and catch them. This whole, to dovetail into a totally tangential thing, this whole chat control debate in Europe, which finally came to a head when Germany said they won't support it. This was insane. This was a proposal to put software on every mobile phone in Europe that would read every text and every message and every email that anyone in Europe was sent or received on the device, and automatically alert authorities if an algorithm decided that it was criminal. This is Orwellian beyond belief. I couldn't believe that it got so far as to almost be passed. This is, and this is punishing the 99.99% of innocent people with an Orwellian system and imposing a rule upon them. It's total state aggression upon the civil population in order to stop some 0.001% of bad actors. Rather, and today, Intel, law enforcement, they all have the capability. They can be in your phone tomorrow. With a warrant, they are in your phone tomorrow. If you have an iPhone, if you have an Android phone, if you have any mainstream phone, unless you're running some lockdown weird thing, they're in your phone tomorrow. And they can see every message you receive as you see it on the screen. And they can read everything you type. So they can already do that to catch the CP bad actors. They can go into their phones. Let's give law enforcement the funding, the tools, the education, everything they need to enforce the law and stop the exploitation of children. But let's not try to police the general population or impose rules on everybody. That's bullshit.
I agree, Jed. And I think it's fun to have a moral argument. It's especially fun to have a moral argument on the internet where we can all throw mud and JPEGs and all these things. But I'm not picking my developers by their morals. I'd like them to have good morals and be honest and true people. But as far as their political beliefs, I want the code written. Like if the code works,
I do
and the
too.
code's not a political thing, we can agree. He's a Republican, I'm liberal, but our code runs great together, and it puts things in and out of the database or whatever it's supposed to do. And just going back one more time to this, for a long time ago, there was really only one position in Bitcoin. It was the libertarian position that Bitcoin is going to break everything, and I don't care, which is a totally fine position. It's very radical, but it's morally very true. It's very easy to understand. As a liberal person in Bitcoin, I've always seen it and said, oh, this world-changing asteroid is coming to kill all the dinosaurs, but maybe we could save a few of the dinosaurs. You know, we don't have to be completely wiped out. We can have a soft landing to the airplane. And I know that's a radical idea. And they're like, well, but the sky is falling and the world order will change. But I'm like that guy in the Foundation book where he's like, yeah, but we could build a plan to have a nicer landing. We could rebuild civilization faster. Like, I'm not saying the world doesn't change. And, you know, we have to all start donating to disaster relief because we can't print money anymore. And I've been very clear on this. Like, you can't print the money. But we could have, you know, we try to have an awareness campaign so people understand this. We can have a soft landing. We can do something.
Which dinosaurs do you want to save? Name some.
Just some of the people. It'd just be less of a, when the large
People,
changes,
yes.
when the large
Yeah.
changes come to history, it's like it's always the small people that get swept up in it, and it's going to be
I
the
agree.
small people again. So, and it's not, you know, it's not the large people or whatever, but there are some people hiding under rocks. Maybe the small mammals also need help from the asteroid. But you know, just this idea that with this JPEG thing, all of a sudden the libertarians are hiding under a rock and choosing moral authority. Who cares about moral authority? As a liberal here, I'm saying the blockchain, the way to send the money, the way to have the shared database, crushes all other software. So if all
Yes.
other software is like the MP3 versus the WAV file, they're going to be wiped out. And we got to get on board with the MP3, liberal, libertarian, conservative, whoever you are. You change your values by the system that you're in. And these people are all like, you know, having a moral freak out over the JPEGs and the alleged JPEGs in the blockchain.
Yeah, Operation Choke Point 2.0 and all that stuff. It's not going to work. And then you wanted to talk about Bitcoin and gold. Do you want to segue into that?
Oh, we got to get Dan in here. Dan, what do you think about the knots and everything we said as we try to escape this topic, which of course we're going to have to talk about again. I hope we please the commenters. Sorry if we said the wrong things. We want to understand this too. We also want to explain it at a lower level and discuss it in like a topic thing where there's morals and CP and all these things. And, you know, I'm sure everyone's tuned out by now. So one guy said, unsubscribed. They discuss things I disagree with. I can't think that much. But hopefully the rest of you are still thinking out there. But Dan, really quick, anything else you want to sum up on the Bitcoin knots debate that we're obviously going to keep having?
Yeah, I mean, it's not quite the scale of the block size wars, right? But and this isn't a consensus change, is it? This is not a consensus change. This is mempool. This is a filtering change, and as we said, it just switches it from one side to another. And of course, perspective seems to be that you can maybe control it more if you put it in if you do increase the opera term, whereas knots is like restrict it as much as possible because then it keeps as much Bitcoin along the money lines as much as more than allowing the innovation. But you could also argue with that the more precious the block space becomes in terms of the cost of it, the more of a powerful money that Bitcoin becomes because of the fact that it's the currency of time and the currency of it's literally the currency of they're already calling it chime chain, right? It's now going to be the currency of time space because it's block space and block time. I don't know. Yeah, it seems it's I wouldn't say much ado about nothing, but it does seem like it's slightly because he's obviously a great developer, but it seems like Luke's gone slightly down the kind of more moral path. And unfortunately, BBC covered this like in 2015, right? They were like, there's porn on the blockchain. I'm pretty sure there's an article from 2015. It's been done then. Imagine how many times it's been done since in a manner that we can't even decode right now, or isn't public, or isn't known. And what happens then? Like, do we turn around and go, there's been 50 transactions that contain CP, we're going to shut it down? Well, that's not going to happen anyway. Like, we just need to be able to control what we do have, and as Jed said, and yourself actually, that the more control we can have outside of that, the better, in terms of having the infrastructure to prevent people from doing child CP, and also the policing of that in general, and also the fact that the money ultimately is the thing that drives CP and other things, right? It's like, people pay for it, right? And it goes back to this old argument of, well, Bitcoin can be used for nefarious things. Well, Bitcoin as a money can be used for nefarious things. Bitcoin as a blockchain can be used for nefarious things, but anything can be used for nefarious things. And if we didn't have Bitcoin, and didn't have fiat money and didn't have gold, people would be trading goats for nefarious things. So, it just, we need to control what we can, and realize that you can't control every element of Bitcoin. And as long as you're not outright allowing it, there's going to be stuff in there that you don't like. And I think really good example that you made, Thomas, that if you're a Christian, you won't like the Quran being in there. If you're a Muslim, you wouldn't like the Bible being in there. And there's always going to be something that someone doesn't like in there.
I agree, Dan, and I think that's really the core point, that the system can't be shut down. Lots of people don't like piracy. They can't shut it down. People don't like people trading money on the Bitcoin blockchain. They can't shut it down. People keep mining it. Yes, some people will turn it off. Monpa blockchain are shutting off all their nodes. They had a moral freak out today, but they've been hosting tons of horrible transactions for years. And they've been, routing them. They've been putting them into the blocks. They've been helping the bad transactions. I don't know. He might have to get out of Bitcoin. It might be too immoral for him. Just the whole thing. I mean, if he really looks at it, like he looks into a mirror one day, he's like, my God, what have I been doing? All the horrible transactions are mine. But that's the complicated nature of reality, right? It's the yin yang, the good and the evil. There's like, parts in all of us, and Bitcoin is like the dollar, is like everything else. It built the hospital, but it also paid for the bombs that destroyed the hospital. Like, it's the same thing. But let's go on to
breathing my air, man.
Uh-huh.
I don't like when bad people breathe my air.
That's right. See, they're recycling it, and that air is just like colored coins. It gets around. We need to tag that air. I can't have that air anymore because it once
I need a bubble.
Exactly. They're going to build a bigger bubble. But we'll talk about this again in a couple weeks, hopefully. Maybe not next week. But moving on to issue 2. Generation Alpha will buy Bitcoin over gold. The new generation, the next generation, as they used to call it in Star Trek, is now called Generation Alpha. And they say they will grow up with Bitcoin as a cultural and financial native, making it their default store of value over traditional gold investments. And we've already seen it just this week on The Late Show with Seth Meyers. Not that people watch that, young people. They were telling jokes about Bitcoin again. Seth was talking about how he was going to make his own cryptocurrency, Eggcoin. And as I've always predicted, once Bitcoin is established as a joke, a complicated joke, first it was hard to understand software, then it was someone who got rich, then it was someone who got poor, now it's someone who got rich again. How confusing that is. But again, the generation that's watching this on TV, watching this in the culture, they're used to it. And as the article says at the end, my favorite part of the article, it says, a generation that won't need convincing. I'm excited for that. Dan, Eve, what do you think about Generation Alpha buying Bitcoin, not gold, and that they won't need convincing? I won't have to do anything anymore. Roger Ver and I can both retire on the island. He'll probably still be there.
Oh, there's like so many other things in tech. It's such a shift in mentality from people not knowing. Like I was saying the other day, that my kids aren't going to know what a DVD is. Everything's digital. They're not going to know what that physical element is, and that's analogous to not knowing what especially because we're going towards a cashless society. Like my son, obviously we give pocket money and stuff, but we give it on an app. He's got his own bank account. He's like 6. It's done like that. It's not done via coins anymore. So they are the digital, generation, especially the latest ones. And they're not going to, especially we've got this push towards we're sort of talking about 15-minute cities and making houses and apartments smaller and more compact. And so people are kind of almost moving out of that materialistic frame of mind because they're moving towards, instead of owning, a house with land, it's, in future it's going to be a more compact lifestyle with less kind of things in it. And so the owning physical money is just going to be alien to them because it's just all going to be on a computer. It's everything. They're never going to use cash. I think by the time, if someone who's born now isn't going to be using cash, that's very unlikely. That EU and stuff are going to try and phase that out. But with the rise of with gold, maybe like I can still see like the Generation Z and stuff getting into gold, because whilst sort of my generation, like is what kind of millennial 40-ish, we were never really taught for some reason about interest and savings properly in school. I think there's probably going to be a bit more of a focus on that for kids. So they are going to know the value, and especially with Bitcoin kind of tipping the monetary system on its head, there is going to be a lot more learning for this new generation. So they are going to know the importance of hedging against inflation, whether that's via gold or Bitcoin. But what is quite cool is that because I thought to myself, I was like, man, going from even $100,000 of Bitcoin to 200,000, it's just, that's such a huge gap now. When we went from $100 to $200, it was almost just such an insignificant drop of water in the ocean. And I thought, even if going from 100,000 to 1 million, that's 10 times the amount. That's insane. Well, gold literally just went from 14 trillion in a small space of time to 24 trillion market cap. And 24 trillion is still 12 times the current Bitcoin market cap. So like the universe is your oyster with Bitcoin, especially as gold is just one of those assets, and Bitcoin covers such a broad range of, that's just gold, right? There's also silver, there's also other precious metals, there's also other assets. And so this latest generation, I think, is going to have such a privilege of knowing about the downsides of fiat, especially because of all the good work that people have done in the early days of spreading that knowledge and getting people involved in Bitcoin, and not just understanding that it's some sort of money go up, number go up money, but it's also the reason behind it is because of I say inflation. Obviously, there is inflation in Bitcoin, but it decreases every year with the block halvenings. But they're going to learn about all that stuff and have all of those bits of information together all in one place as they grow up. Probably going to have courses on it in school, and yeah, I think they're a really lucky generation.
I think you're right, Dan. You make a good point about the cashless generation. I've been carrying around my iPhone lately, and I forget my wallet sometimes because you can use click to pay everywhere. I had hoped that was going to be Bitcoin or maybe Lightning transaction, and maybe it will in the future. But for right now, click to pay, tap to pay, it works great. You really don't need cash anymore. I mean, I traveled country to country, not really getting any cash. You used to always get some for a backup. Even the bathroom machines would take a quarter, things like that. A lot of those are cashless now. More and more people are saying, just like Las Vegas, leading the way, you don't want that guy going around emptying out the coins. It's a huge waste of time for you to carry around coins, put them in the machine so a guy can come around and take them out of the machine. It's so much easier to do it cashless. And it is sad, Dan, as you said, being old, they often have those ads on Facebook or wherever it says, the last time you burned a CD. And then for me, it's like a DVD, a Blu-ray, a 3.5 floppy, a 5 1/4 floppy, an Atari cartridge, an NES cart. But kids are going to have no idea of these media formats and 8 tracks and records. Imagine them buying gold, weighing it with an old-timey scale, weights on both sides. And then gold can be impure, it can be lead, it can be shiny. With a Bitcoin or with an NFT that you can link back to its source, you can tell cryptographically that it is the thing that it says it is. Such a transition, so much easier. You don't have to trust anyone with the Bitcoin. Jed, what do you think about the upcoming generation and the idea that they might love Bitcoin, not gold?
My son saved up his money from his chores and whatnot without telling me. And in 2019, he came to me and gave me around 1,500 euros and said, Dad, buy me some Bitcoin with this. And he's 20 now. So, that was 6 years ago. It's So it was clear to him already back then, maybe because I'm a Bitcoiner, but it was clear to him that this is where the future of investment lies. This is the future of money. And this, he wants to buy Bitcoin as opposed to anything else because he sees Bitcoin as being an avenue to freedom, to help him find a wife and have a family and have a free life as an individual. And I think that generation is seeing that, and they won't need convincing, as you said, which is great. And they're going to buy Bitcoin because it's a much better store of value. It's a much better money than any other option. And gold is hard to transport. It's hard to do. It has all these. We all know these things. That said, gold is still, as you said, 24 trillion as of today or whatever, 12x Bitcoin. So Bitcoin's got a long way to go. We're still early. And what worries me the most about this situation is despite having a $24 trillion market cap, gold is still manipulated.
All right, we seem to have lost Jed. He was telling us that gold was manipulated, perhaps a conspiracy.
It's true, man. Like, wasn't it even only about 6 years ago that there was big that one was it HSBC got done for manipulating the markets?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
There's also a lot of manipulation in the silver market. Jed, before they cut you off, you were saying gold was manipulated before they cut you off. Go ahead.
Yeah, it is. And what my biggest fear is now, what we see with BlackRock and everyone piling in on Bitcoin, is that it's a capture play. And they're going to manipulate. And why is Bitcoin sticking at 110, 115, 109, 113? Why is Bitcoin bouncing around in this zone for so long when there is clearly demand outstripping supply by a factor of 10? It's only paper Bitcoin that can make that happen. And this to me looks like a capture play that we are seeing in slow motion. And if we don't wake up to that and self-custody and get your Bitcoin out of those ETFs as far as you can, okay, we've all got 401ks or ISAs in the UK that you need to put into some kind of exchange traded thing where it's paper Bitcoin. You have to trust a third party, but wherever you can, get it off, because I think that this is a capture that we're seeing. And while it's a 2 trillion, 2.5 trillion market, before it gets to 24 trillion and surpasses gold, and before Bitcoin gets to 1 million, they want to capture and control it.
Well, and we've all been on this show, we've been watching Bitcoin for a long time. Before it was a small country. Now it's passing Amazon, it's passing Microsoft, things like that. It was easier to kill back then. And we always said a state actor like the US or China could easily afford to do it. Like Jed saying, it's starting to reach the point of like a black hole and the exit horizon. They're starting to get closer and closer to the black hole where they can no longer pull out. So this could be their last desperate attempt to sink Bitcoin by overprinting and by causing a collapse and so forth.
Well, that'll just drive Bitcoin up. I think by flooding the Bitcoin space with paper Bitcoin and making 90% of Bitcoin owners paper Bitcoin owners, they can do exactly what they did with the gold market.
It does make a difference if you hold your own keys. I wonder if the kids of the future will learn about that. But shout out to Starship Schrodinger's Destiny in the chat. He says, alphas will be the first generation that will be adults who have known Bitcoin exists for all their life. He used to think that it would take 3 generations for that to be true. Now he thinks it might happen faster. So very exciting news from the article, and we'll see how it goes. Hello to Generation Alpha, although, of course, if you've seen our statistics, you know that sadly our YouTube audience is about 30 to 40 years old, white and male. So we're always welcome to other people, and we hope many people in many countries and stuff see this show, but what the stats say is not that. But you could check it out and learn more at worldcryptonetwork.com, where we've got 4,531 videos, all for free on YouTube, and worldcryptonetwork.com. Issue 3, shares in Bitcoin hoarders sink as crypto treasury mania sours. Fundraisings have continued even as falling share prices leave some companies worth less than their crypto holdings. We've seen that shares in Strategy, aka MicroStrategy, have fallen 18% over the last month to its lowest level since April. We've also seen Metaplanet, the Japanese hoarder, they're calling them Bitcoin hoarders now instead of holders. That's an interesting turn of events, has dropped 68% from its peak in mid-June. Let's go to Jed AI. What do you think about the Bitcoin hoarder treasury companies suddenly having their stocks fall, and they're not the hot thing in Wall Street that they were a few weeks ago?
It's just bound to happen. I think that the value of these companies was so small to begin with. Many of them focused on hoarding or holding Bitcoin as a way to build value on their balance sheet, increase their share price. But ultimately, their shares should trade at a value of their Bitcoin plus a very small premium if they have a profitable business that they run alongside it. There's no reason that the shares would trade at any higher multiple than the spot value of the Bitcoin they hold plus the value of the business that they run. And they've all been playing this game of we could trade at double the spot value of our Bitcoin. The premium on MicroStrategy has been insane. And that's simply because it was accessible through so many investment vehicles that weren't allowed to buy Bitcoin directly.
But Jed, what about other companies like Apple trading at 10 times earnings, things like this? Don't stocks just automatically have this bonus because we're using jargon and lingo and you have to get through us to get to the market? Shouldn't the Bitcoin ETF or the Michael Saylor company be worth 10 times what it has in Bitcoin just because? No reason?
Bitcoin earnings are accessible to anybody just by buying Bitcoin. You don't need to buy MicroStrategy to get Bitcoin's earnings. You can just buy Bitcoin. So unless the MicroStrategy business of selling business intelligence software is growing at a rate that justifies a multiple of earnings, which it is not, which is why Michael Saylor decided to do this whole strategy. When you've got a company that's at a ceiling, that's effectively a working zombie, it may even be profitable, but it's just moving forward and it's not going to grow. You can juice it with Bitcoin. That's what Michael Saylor realized, and he's done a brilliant job of it. And he has become a Bitcoin advocate, and more power to him. I think he's done a lot of good for the Bitcoin community. The net of what he's done is definitely good. So that is important. But all the followers who just want to add Bitcoin to the balance sheet so that they can try to juice their stock price, forget it. It doesn't make sense. That said, I think having Bitcoin on your balance sheet as a company is a valuable strategy. It's something that my company has done since 2018. We've accepted Bitcoin, we've held Bitcoin, and it has been a useful thing. The COVID downturn and all the economic turmoil that came there would have been much more difficult if my company hadn't had Bitcoin on the balance sheet before that.
But isn't it a tradition in Wall Street to tip 10% of your earnings to the management company? Michael Saylor said if Bitcoin goes up 35%, but MicroStrategy goes up 25%, you would be better in MicroStrategy, even though if you had the Bitcoin, you'd be 10% richer. But the elegance of dealing with a managerial structure like this, the difficulty of learning how to hold your own Bitcoin, isn't that worth the 10%, obviously, to the broker or the MicroStrategy or Metaplanet holder?
I don't think I'm qualified to answer that, but I do think that disintermediation is sexy. So
it would be cool if we could do that vertical integration and I could get 10% from everybody and it would be like a middleman. I would like to be the middleman, right?
Yeah,
And get 10%.
exactly.
Do nothing.
Connect.
Yeah. Why can't that be us as MicroStrategy? Dan, Eve, what do you think? Should they, let's see, the article is about Bitcoin hoarders. MicroStrategy's finally down. The stock's down. It's probably a good buy now. Should it trade at 10 times its Bitcoin reserves or 2 times, as Jed has said? Or is this a more reasonable valuation for MicroStrategy, Metaplanet, and the other Bitcoin hoarders? As we remember, dragons hoard, Bitcoiners hodl.
I think MicroStrategy smashed it with their strategy, funnily enough. But it's lost its kind of weight because of the fact that the ETFs have made it more accessible for these funds and people that were previously unable to buy Bitcoin using pension funds, for example, to be able to get in. So there was a premium initially because you couldn't switch your pension over to buy Bitcoin directly. Now we've got these Bitcoin ETFs. It changes the ballgame completely. There is obviously the argument to be said that you've got the third party risk of someone holding the coins, but you're offsetting the risk, right? Because that's a choice that you make. Is you can have the risk yourself, or you can hand off the risk to someone else to manage it for you. And if you're someone that's not technically you don't have a technical mindset, it could be a very fearful thing knowing that your whole destiny is in your hands of holding those keys. And actually, I think it was a quote from Lop that I saw recently. Was it James Lop? Oh no, in fact it was not so fast. He mentioned about the fact that one of the biggest kind of Bitcoiners' dreams is to make it in Bitcoin in terms of have enough to live for the rest of your life, and then just disappear. A lot of these people, they make enough and then they just disappear. And part of the reason is because the more Bitcoin increases in value, if you're a self-custody person, the more risk you have of being a wrench attack and whatever other types of attacks there are. So people are making a conscious decision to actually offset that risk and say, well, I'd rather not even have the possibility of, say, a wrench attack and just hand it over to holding MicroStrategy or holding a Bitcoin ETF, and then which has got its own difficulties of how hard it is to get my money out from these from these different areas, and having these different safety systems in place just in case something like that happens. So whilst it was a proper cash cow, it's not so much now. However, there's also other kind of nefarious things that I've read about. Not nefarious, but like speculation that some of these companies, the directors obviously have to declare their shares, etc. But they may have used other people, had other people buy their shares, then gone public for them, then gone public with the fact that they're stacking a bunch of Bitcoin. The share price increases massively. They then dump the shares, they buy the Bitcoin or buy the shares back after they realize that the premium is over. So there is a kind of more snidey way that people have tried to make money from it. But yeah, I think it's all about offsetting the risk for a lot of people now, especially with these, what we're hearing about the Ledger guy having his was it the Ledger guy had his finger cut off or something like that? No,
He was kidnapped. Yeah,
he was
And
kidnapped.
his
So
finger.
there's all these
There was a
stories.
wave in France of kidnappings, and ETFs become attractive because of
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
I found that they're also attractive because you can borrow against them. If you have ETFs in a regular portfolio, you can then borrow against that portfolio.
Oh wow, I don't know.
And
Yeah.
so you can then take your cash out without selling your Bitcoin, your paper Bitcoin that you've given to someone else. But at least you can borrow against it and get fiat money to live your life without having to sell your Bitcoin. So, and that's at very low rates, much lower than any of the crypto lenders by a factor of 10%. So yeah, that is an interesting fact of the ETF world.
I didn't
And
know that.
it is a really big difference versus how much stock you have versus how much Bitcoin you have. Lots of people are calculating their MicroStrategy stock into a Bitcoin number. But like we all know from startups or any movie ever, they're going to dilute your stock, right? Your stock's going to
Yes.
be worth less. MicroStrategy, somebody had class A, you have class C. Bad news for you, you're getting 10% less Bitcoin. Whereas if you have a Bitcoin number like 0.001, you have that number.
Yeah.
So it would be much better to hold in that way than the other way. And we've seen recently with MicroStrategy, initially he was selling to big Wall Street people. This last round, he did a retail round selling to normal people. It still sold out. He got lots of money. He bought Bitcoin. The timing worked out so far. But we're keeping an eye on it, which moves to the exit question. Will MicroStrategy and MetaPlanet continue? Will we continue to see these huge buys, these huge raises, or has Bitcoin treasury companies cooled down? Dan Eve, does it continue or cool down?
I think it's going to come in another wave. I think a lot of companies have heard about it and they're prepping up to start it, and there'll be like the second wave of companies doing it. But the more accessible Bitcoin it becomes to invest in from via other vessels, the less we're going to see that as a you know a sideway into a segue into Bitcoin. An alternate route into owning Bitcoin.
Yeah, the purpose of their
Segue
company.
or a segwit.
Yeah.
There's many ways, but it
A
will be
segue
interesting.
into
Dan,
Bitcoin.
there
One
could
thing
be
you
a
said,
second
Dan,
wave. Think about
that
Bank of America if they suddenly say we're 10% backed by Bitcoin, and then Wells Fargo says 15%.
we're
There
going to
could
get
be a
there.
second wave. Jed, will it be a second wave, or is it going to cool down?
Oh no, that's 20 or 30 years from now when the banks start saying they're backed. But there will be an innovation wave on it. But Bitcoin as a treasury asset will become institutionalized, I think. But it won't become a sensationalized asset where people chase the stock. So it's not a Wall Street bets thing anymore. And one thing you said earlier, Dan, I'd like to echo that. The way I think about it is, what is the motive of these people? The directors that you said are like buying the stock and selling the stock and then using that to get the Bitcoin and cheating everybody. And management cheats the shareholders. I have been screwed out of so much in stock investing between 1995 and 2009. I lost a lot of money in stocks because management made bad decisions that were not in favor of the shareholders and screwed me as a shareholder over by diluting the stock. So I learned the hard way that you don't ever trust a company or management. But what is their motive? So if the company, if the management, if their goal really is to stack more Bitcoin and to have Bitcoin, then they are probably good. But if their goal is to stack more fiat and get more fiat for themselves, then they are evil. They are not working in the best interest of the shareholder. They are working in their own best interest. And you can tell a lot about a person by what they're trying to stack. And that's sort of how I see that closing out on that. And the premiums, Thomas, I didn't say two times. I think MicroStrategy should trade at the Bitcoin spot value of their treasury, plus the value of their business, which is like 100 million bucks. So the company shouldn't trade at more than spot value plus 100 million bucks.
We've also seen different strategies for these Bitcoin companies and ETFs. Some, like Nakamoto, have claimed that they would be buying and selling the peaks. I don't know how they determine that. Others, like Strike, have said, we are going to hold on to everything. We are just going to hold on. It is very simple. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. And again, as an eBay user, I never received any stock for being an early user of eBay. Completely screwed, nothing at all. Moving on to issue 4. Parabolic Bitcoin rally is coming, according to Bitcoin Magazine. And there's more. The Winklevoss twins say that Bitcoin is at the bottom of the first inning. It could reach $1 million in 10 years. Dan, Eve, what do you think about everyone's most important aspect of Bitcoin? The price, the price, the price, and the price of Bitcoin.
Well, we've had a lot of not controversy, but a lot of FUD recently about the old wallets that have suddenly come alive, right? But that just seems to happen every time that there's a bull run. It just seems like every time there's a bull run, you don't really hear about the wallets. And maybe it's because they're very clever people, but you don't really hear about the wallets that have been dormant for for years, suddenly becoming live and being used and moved around at the trough of like in between the bear markets. It's always when the bull run happens because people have their price targets, right? They finally snap and they're like, right, I can't hack it any longer, or they're just like the James Howe guy that finally find their hard drive, and it takes a bull run to be able to motivate them. But the more that time goes on, the more the people get into the hodl mantra. We've definitely had a complete shift from like the early days when I got in, which is relatively early, like 2013. About it, it's money. It's we use it as money. It's cash. It's we use it and moving into the frame of like we hodl it. We don't spend it. It's precious as possible. So. And that mindset spreads. It's changed completely. There's not many people that really use it or want to use it anymore. They want to they want to just keep it, and then even just parting with it becomes such a difficult task. And as that mindset grows in people, it's like a mind virus that says you can't sell your Bitcoin, you can't part with it. And so as the social aspect of that just continues, it becomes harder for people to sell their Bitcoin, especially when you've got, as you've just said, Strike saying, their strategy is literally just to never sell. But at the same time, there's the fear that when you have a company like Strategy that has such a huge proportion of Bitcoin owned, they are going to, they can't hold it. They're going to sell one day, right? Is that how does it work? They've got to, they're going to have to sell something one day. And how much is that going to be? And what sort of, under what conditions is that going to be under? So whilst it's really cool to hear about these big companies that are hoarding it, there's also a bit of fear that comes with that. As what is their point of sale? What is Strategy's strategy?
And I know everyone wants to borrow against their Bitcoin now, but if we think about strategy or a government level holding, and we say, okay, the government of Texas wants to borrow against their, $10 billion in Bitcoin, there's not a big enough lender. Just like in the movie The Big Short, you have to create these new investments, and then there may or may not be someone there willing to take that new investment, especially if Bitcoin keeps going up. Who's going to take the bet against it? That's a hard bet. As Dan was saying as well, we've also seen real estate is losing its interest for a lot of people. I'm not a big fan, but real estate investor Grant Cardone, I think he was on the something about like being a billionaire show, and they made him restart his life and start sales again with nothing. And it was really fascinating. But recently he's sold his like $44 million mansion for Bitcoin. So if you look at these people that previously said, you can't get enough real estate, my life is about real estate, they invest all the way up to the mansion level. And then they say, well, I kind of want what that libertarian kid's got hidden underneath his house. I want these numbers on a blockchain. Jed, what do you think about the price of Bitcoin? The Winklevoss saying maybe $1 million, and also others selling their real estate to get this valuable digital number thing that we've been talking about for so long.
I think it's not a question of Bitcoin going up. It's a question of the dollar going down. How fast is the dollar going to go down? How fast is fiat going to go down? And how fast are they going to print is what's going to drive that largely. So when measuring Bitcoin in dollar terms, I feel kind of funny because I've actually started thinking of wealth in Bitcoin terms as the reserve asset for the planet. And that when you start thinking that way, you think about how fast are these other assets going to go down in Bitcoin? How are they going to depreciate in Bitcoin terms? And the first thing that's going to be demonetized or reduced in value is fiat currency. Obviously, we're seeing that. We've been seeing it for over a decade. But real estate, gold, these are the things, the monetary premium, real estate as a store of value is going to lose its appeal because it's not mobile. It's hard to sell. It takes months to sell. And it has upkeep and it has taxes and you don't really own it. That's why I think Texas is debating it and Florida is proposing it, that there will be no property tax on your primary residence. Something I've said for a long time. There should be no tax on a primary residence because the government should not be able to make anybody homeless. If I inherit a house from my parents and I can't afford to pay the property tax on it, I'll be made homeless because I don't have enough money to pay the property tax on my family home. And that is simply wrong, that a government would make someone who grew up in a house homeless. So looking at real estate from that perspective, that you don't actually own it, because if you don't pay the property tax, it'll be taken away. It's not a good store of value. It's not a good asset for the long term, for generational wealth. Bitcoin is. So it makes total sense that Bitcoin's going to demonetize or take away the store of value and the monetary premium in all these other assets. So we got a long ways to go, and they are going to go down in Bitcoin terms. It's not a question of whether Bitcoin will be $1 million. It will be someday, 10 years, maybe 1 year, maybe 100 years. I don't know. I can't predict it. I just know that it's going to go up. It's going up forever, Laura. That's it. And so that's sort of how I see that one. Yeah, it's just what it is.
Well,
You know,
and sadly, Jed, the endless printing of dollars has deprived a lot of people of their houses, as well as the high medical costs in the United States. Most people trade their
Absolutely.
house for their medical costs. We all die anyway, spoiler alert, and the medical costs are still there. The house is gone. But maybe Bitcoin gives them a chance. And again, maybe we should all be renting. Who knows what the right thing to do is at all times. But it is like Jed said, it would be great if they had no property tax on the primary residence. You could establish a home. Of course, other people would establish a giant mansion home, as we've seen in Florida, where they can't take your residence. So a lot of people who are under suspicion move to Florida, buy a large homestead, they call it there, and they homestead in a giant mansion. But I do agree with the core of what Jed's saying. People shouldn't be forced out of their houses. We do raise a lot of funds for the government through property taxes. So I don't see that going away. Dan, you had more on this?
Yeah, I was going to say we've got back to that kind of that shift, right? I think Jed, you said about the guy the portfolio was saying, right, rather than holding my housing portfolio, I'm going to shift it into Bitcoin. That goes along with what we were saying earlier about the shift from the next generation knowing about the digital gold, which is Bitcoin, versus other physical assets. And you know, my parents have always been about property. It's like property is the thing that you buy, and I've just seen so many people recently that have shifted and said, you know, I always knew property is, because if you think about from a technical level, right, there's of just understanding about inflation and about the thing that an asset that can appreciate. Most people don't think of gold as an asset that could appreciate. They think about the easiest thing to think about is property. Own a property,
Most
goes
people
up in
don't even
value.
know about compound interest, Dan. Even when we were
Exactly.
talking earlier, I was like, you get a savings
Yeah.
account, you know, you get 101, you get 103, you get
Yeah.
105, you know, it's a magical thing as a kid, you know.
So like houses are the base level of appreciation in people's minds, and then you've got things like, you know, you've got, you know, gold, you've got stocks and people understanding dividends and that sort of thing, and then kind of Bitcoin is this new holy grail of understanding technology and all these kind of things mixed in about scarcity and stuff like that. But it does seem like we are moving into a way and tying back to the handing off of risk from owning your own Bitcoin to having it in an ETF or that side. There's also the people are seeing like the handing off of the risk of owning a property. Like it's not so. Like 20 years ago, 30 years ago, there was so much like less stuff to do, and like people didn't have phones in their hand all the time that glued their attention. You were bored a lot more often, right? You were just bored. There were times where you were bored. Whereas now, and you're like, what do I do? Oh, I'm going to do something to the property. I'll like fix it up a bit. Now people are like, they've got so much going on. They just want to hand off that risk, give it to someone else to maintain. Light bulb, well, obviously light bulb goes, that's not, but you know, the boiler breaks, give it to someone else to organize and sort out and, you know, fix and all that. And just own the Bitcoin, rent and own Bitcoin. That's going to appreciate much more than a house. And then in 10, 20 years time anyway, you've accelerated far beyond what you would have done with just having one house that you've gradually paid off and all of that debt that you've paid off in the meantime. And you've actually still had the same level of house, but you've had Bitcoin that appreciates way beyond what the property market's done.
And I think everyone in the audience wants to see how much their Bitcoin's going to appreciate. And they're waiting for the exit question, predicting against the magical predictor ball, the source of all truth in this universe. Jed, will the price of Bitcoin be higher or lower this time next week?
Well, higher. I'd say higher.
Jed says higher. Dan, Eve, higher or lower?
Oh, higher, baby. All-time high. Let's go for it. All-time high. It's only 10K away ish.
It was
Getting
looking
close.
good today. And as you know, the price always goes up when we do shows. Historically, since we started doing shows, the price is nothing but up. You can look it up. But we must check with the 8-ball that knows all. Will the price of Bitcoin be higher this time next week? It's very hard to read. There are a lot of bubbles. It's been shaken a lot, this ball. Let's see. Outlook, not good. Outlook, not good. The ball is bearish. We have one more story for you, the bonus story this week. As we've been covering it for years, he's back again. For 12 years, he searched in vain for his currently 737 million pound fortune in a landfill. It says euros, actually. Now, a new series gives him a second chance. James Howells is back again. He's searching for his hard drive in the landfill, but this time he's got an American television series that is covering him. He had previously given up hope, as we discussed many times. His girlfriend threw out the hard drive. He thinks it went to this landfill. He's been talking to the council. I thought he should have run for council. I thought he should have printed his own coin. He should have had some large corporation where everyone could invest like a lottery ticket. You get 12x if he finds it. You get nothing if he doesn't find it. Some people like that kind of risk. They're into it. Dan, you know about councils. Howell had given up, but now he's going to be on TV. So one more time, we all think the hard drive's crushed. We all think the platters are smashed. We don't think the data's there, even if you reconstructed it. But Dan, he's back again. One more time, our pal James. What do you think?
Well, this story just gets even more silly because there's plenty of people that have lost money, but the fact that he's lost this hard drive and it's in a physical place, but it's in a giant landfill, right? The odds of finding it are so ridiculously slim, but also the fact that it's like he's taken it to the European Court of Human Rights now. One thing that I've seen as the biggest problem to the biggest hurdle to this, where I just don't think he should be allowed to do it, simple as, is that you would be infringing on the rights of everyone whose private rubbish was put in there. Anyone else whose hard drive was recovered and it's not his specific hard drive, they would have to root through that data and find a bunch of personal information. And it's not because they're finding a crime or something like that. They're rooting through the information to solve a crime. This is to make someone money. And I don't understand how a court is going to pass that. Yeah, you can rifle through everyone else's rubbish, search through all of their hard drives just to find your money, and we'll take a cut of it. And the European Court of Human Rights, what are they going to do? Like, what are they do? Like, oh yeah, we supersede the right. We're going to supersede the rights of all the people in Wales, for example, whose data is going to be rifled through because of what? I don't know.
Is it still his drive?
Yes, yeah, exactly.
I'm not a lawyer, but
yeah.
in the US, usually when the trash is picked up, it's not yours anymore.
Yep.
You don't own that trash anymore.
It's possible he might have a key or a password they'd have to additionally crack, so maybe he could work a deal with the government. I think it would be still a percentage exchange, Jed. He's not going to have 100% of this.
Oh yeah, he'll organize a cut, but it still means that they're rifling through other people's private information.
Which they gave up, though. It's not private anymore. If you don't wipe your drive before you throw it out, that's your problem.
That is
There's still some expectation of privacy. If the drive goes to a landfill, you don't expect this guy's going to come along looking for hard drives, pick up every single one, then find yours. Maybe has the horrible data on it or something, and he can make a side deal doing this. For all we know, he's going to make a reality show each hard drive. We found another hard drive. What's on it?
It's like that storage unit show.
That's it. Yeah,
that's brilliant. Like Storage Wars. And they
on
just
this one.
in the guy. See again, this is the sequel. The reality show producers right now are writing this down there. If we found any hard drives, we could put them publicly, put the contents on there, because who knows who owns it? Like, why not just do it?
It's
like
child porn.
And it's so funny. It's all the work to guard your privacy with the cookie warnings and the porn warnings and the whatever else you guys got going over there. And then they're going to say, no, this one man's quest for a hard drive supersedes all privacy regulations.
Yeah.
Yeah. He should have the serial number of it. He should have the receipt when he bought it, or some such proof.
If you don't have the receipt, how could he claim it from the landfill? I mean, I can't get things from Best Buy without a receipt. I mean, you got to have the receipt.
Exactly.
You didn't save the receipt? Oh. But again, it's a great chance for me to reference Douglas Copeland, the great writer, and his book, Shampoo Planet, that everyone should check out. In Shampoo Planet, one of the characters suggested they could open Historyland, and that you too could dig through actual history and sort it and shift it and sift it and take some of it home. Yes, you could dig through old landfills and find old antique cans and garbage from the 80s and the 50s. And he was just talking about tricking people into digging and sorting the landfills for free. And we're right there. We've got it for hard drives. So check out Shampoo Planet by Douglas Copeland. Jed, what do you think? We talk about this guy all the time. We said last time would be the last time because he had given up. And I said, oh, he'll never give up. And I just plotted in my mind like 737 million euros, 800 million euros, 900. At what point does a large level corporation or some kind of gambling guy get in and say, hey, at 1 to 10, we should buy this land. We should dig this up. We're there again, Jed, but now it's a TV show. Is he going to get it? Obviously we're going to watch this show. I'm glued to this. Get me the download as soon as I can. Let's get this. But what do you think, Jed, about the show?
It will end sadly.
Oh, no big victory. My favorite is still the guy who he had forgotten his key, and they had some way they were going to crack it, and he couldn't use their way because he'd already signed with another company, and they didn't know how to crack it. So now the solution is there, but he can't use it because he made another deal, and who knows if it expires. But there's lots of fun old Bitcoins out there, and we're going to keep talking about them. James Howell and his Landfill Bitcoin, the We Use Coins guys who locked up hundreds of Bitcoin on a CD or something like that. They don't have the code. Stuff like that just keeps happening, and it's going to be part of Bitcoin lore forever. So thanks to everybody for joining us. We're going to go to predictions or story of the week. Jed, do you have a prediction or a story of the week? Anything that you're working on at Quantum Project X?
No, observing at the moment. I think that there are a lot of interesting things going on. It is a surreal time to be alive. I think I don't know how much of the news is true, but most of it obviously isn't, which makes me really doubt history. So I'm trying to get back to reality.
There's been crazy news every day. It feels more and more like we're living in a movie. Someone referenced Stephen King's The Dead Zone, where the president is angry and starts a war to distract from his domestic problems. That's a book from the 80s, obviously widely available as a movie as well. Other things seem to be happening like RoboCop, where crime is rising and we need corporate police to stop it. And the corporate police are helping the crime rise. All kinds of things are great out there. And like you say, you can never trust what you read. You never know who this guy is working for, or if he was just a student or just a friend, and he just knows how to shoot really good.
It's really bizarre, isn't
really
it?
good at shooting. Yeah.
And the normalization of violence in politics is something that is happening. And that is a sad thing to see.
Yeah.
And then sadly in the United States, our only hope comes from satire and the South Park guys who keep saying that it's a small penis every week. And that's the largest way to hurt a large emperor who has a large ego, is to say there's a small penis. But then now there's violence as well. Dan, Eve, what do you think? Do you have a prediction or a story of the week? Go ahead.
Well, just very quickly, is there a new South Parkers episode tonight? Is it tonight or was it last night?
I think it might be delayed. I think they're doing an every other week schedule.
Every other week.
Probably helps them write the current stuff,
Yeah.
and unfortunately makes us wait. But it's been a great season so far. They have hopefully temporarily censored the recent episode about debate, where Cartman becomes a right-wing kind of disagree with you debate guy in the mold of Charlie Kirk, who they give a award out to during the show, the Charlie Kirk Master Debater Award, something like that. It's apparently not funny anymore. Hopefully it'll be funny again soon. But yes, it's a sad time, or it's a time of violence. I don't know what it is. Let's get off it. Go ahead, Dan.
Well, he thought it was very funny at the time, which was it was well received by him. But yeah, so my story. So story of the week. Well, prediction: Bitfest 2025 is going to be really cool. That's bitfest.co.uk. And then story of the week. I've been vibe coding, man. I've been vibe coding. It's pretty cool. I've been using like a mixture of cursor and a bunch of other stuff, and making some cool little apps. I've got some really cool like app that's all like it's so close to actually being released, and it's not anything crypto related. It's to do with I'm not going to tell anyone because it's so easy to make the damn thing. But it's just I've just got a few kind of really cool like little ideas, and I've just been working on those, and it's come so long since I gave ChatGPT like years ago. I was like, make me a snake game, and then I've slowly iterated on that, knowing absolutely nothing about coding, because most of my work's in SQL and stuff like that. And now you can literally just build a fully working app. It's incredible using like Cursor and other apps, Firebase Studio and stuff. And Yeah, although the other problem is Firebase Studio is it bigs you up too much, man. I read about people becoming narcissists from using AI, and it's so true. Like everything you say, especially with Firebase, it's like that's such a great idea, man. How did you think of that? And you're like, oh, Firebase, stop. You start, and then it's like, oh, I'm sorry, I'm really sorry. It just makes you.
It's definitely one of the things covered by the South Park guys. They're like, oh, I want to make a restaurant where we serve salads made out of meat. And it's like, that's a great idea. I have many ways I could help you do that.
Yeah.
And the woman realized, she's like, this machine just agrees with everything. That was a wonderful scene.
It does. You've got to be
They're
careful because
terrible.
you end up going down a route and you're like, this is actually an appalling idea. Why did you agree with me? Or even just adding a feature, you're like, oh, the idea is still okay, but we've just spent like a day building something that, and you sent me down that line, Firebase or Cursor or whatever. But no, it's really cool. Check it out, Cursor. And you can give it just a one-liner and it will create you something. It's pretty fantastic. And then iteratively build it, But the main thing is that if you're going to do it, just get hot on version control straight away, because it will break something and then it takes ages to fix if you're not testing every iteration. So yeah.
And if you put anything publicly facing, audit it carefully because it
Yes.
ignores security.
Yes, 100%.
Well, it sounds fantastic, Dan, and really fun. Everyone can get involved with some vibe coding. And like Dan said, shout out to BitFest at bitfest.uk, November 21st through 23rd in Manchester, UK. It's a grassroots event, Bitcoin for the people. So go buy your tickets today at bitfest.uk. Also, just a story of the week. I just watched this documentary called Super/Man about Christopher Reeves. It was really inspiring, the way that he accepted and worked with his paralysis, trying to raise funds and scientific awareness for others, how he was, strong as a person, strong as an actor, and then strong with a disability. So it was a really strong movie, a really cool movie called Super/Man or Super/Man, something like that. And very cool to see the Christopher Reeves story. Check that out. And that's about it for this week. It's a great chance to give us a thumbs up down below. Say hello in the comments. We'll go check out the chat. I hope we did good reviewing the comments from last week. Obviously, we don't get everything right on issues like knots and consensus changes, but we try to get them right. We try to explain it to you guys and have a fun debate about it. Let us know in the comments. Hopefully, we did better this week. We'll try to get Ben on here soon to give us the technical versions of things. But until then, until next time, bye-bye.